What if I told you that 2 pieces of metal, a wooden stake, and some damp soil could create an invisible boundary that insects simply refuse to cross? No chemicals, no sprays, no monthly subscription, no maintenance after the first rainfall. And what if I told you this wasn't some fringe experiment or backyard theory, but a documented, peer-reviewed, 270-year-old technology that was actively buried? Not because it failed, but because nobody could figure out how to charge you a monthly fee for copper wire and dirt? Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you is going to change the way you look at every can of bug spray you've ever bought. The pest control industry generates $5.5 billion a year. $5.5 billion. And a huge chunk of that comes from insecticides that were never actually designed for your backyard. They were designed for jungle warfare. Organophosphate compounds, reformulated after World War II from nerve agents into products you spray around your children's swing set. Products that last maybe 3 hours before you need to reach for the can again. That's the business model. Buy it, use it, watch it expire, buy it again. But here's what they never wanted you to find. There is a mechanism, simple, cheap, self-sustaining, that creates a biological deterrent field insects will not enter. It was documented in the 1700s, replicated in the 1800s, scaled commercially in the 1920s, and then it was economically erased, not disproven, not debunked, erased, because it worked too well, cost too little, and lasted too long. Building electroculture stakes is simple and affordable. About $20 for all you need. First, get bare 16-gauge copper wire. Search electroculture copper wire on Amazon. Look for a 1-pound spool of 99.9% pure copper, roughly 125 to 130 feet. It costs around $13 to $15 and lasts for years. Next, pick up galvanized steel wire, which is zinc-coated and acts as your reactive electrode. Home Depot sells 100 feet of 14-gauge wire for $8 to $10. You'll also need bamboo stakes or wooden dowels, about 3 feet long. A pack of 10 costs around $5. Altogether, expect to invest $20 to $25 for 3 stakes with leftover wire. To assemble, wrap 3 feet of copper wire in a loose spiral on the lower part of a stake. Then do the same with the zinc wire, ensuring both metals touch the soil but do not contact each other above ground. Drive the stake 6 to 12 inches into damp soil. Moisture activates the reaction. Water in the soil is the electrolyte. If soil is dry, pour water around the base initially. Rain recharges it naturally. And that's it. Simple, effective electroculture stakes you can build yourself. Every single time it rains, you get a fresh charge. You do nothing else. You just let it run. For a campsite or outdoor gathering space, build 3 stakes and arrange them in a triangle. 1 near your tent, 1 near your cooking area, 1 near your fire. That covers roughly 225 square feet. For standing water, rain barrels, bird baths, any low spot that pools and doesn't drain, drop a loose coil of bare copper wire directly into the water and leave it there. Based on the research I'm going to show you in a moment, that single action achieves near total mosquito larval mortality without a single toxic compound. But before we get to the science, I have to tell you what happened on my own property. Because this is what started everything. It was last July, peak summer. The kind of heat that sits on you, heavy, humid, unmoving. I had 2 rain barrels running on opposite sides of the house. By mid-July, one of them had become a mosquito hatchery. Every 3 days, I was out there in the evening heat, dumping and scrubbing, swatting at my arms and neck, watching larvae swirl in the murky water like it was their private nursery. It was exhausting. It felt endless. The other barrel? Clean. All season. Not once did I see a single larva in it. I thought it was luck. Maybe the angle of the sun. Maybe something subtle about the placement. I genuinely could not explain it. And then I found the Becker study. I was reading through it at my desk late one night and I stopped cold. Because I suddenly realized the first barrel sits near the copper downspout. Water runs across the metal roof, flashing before it ever reaches that container. There's a continuous trace of copper ions entering that barrel every time it rains. I had the answer sitting on my roof the entire time. I'd been living with a working demonstration of this technology for years without knowing it. That's how buried this actually is. Now I need to take you back, because the history of this, the real history, reads less like a science textbook and more like a cover-up hiding in plain sight. Paris, 1747. Abbé Jean-Antoine Nollet is the personal physicist to King Louis XV. This is a man who once lined up 200 monks, connected them hand to hand, and sent an electrical charge through all of them simultaneously, just to prove that electricity travels through the human body. He was not a man who missed details. He sets up what seems like a straightforward experiment. 2 identical pots of soil, same seeds, same sunlight, same water. One variable. One pot receives a steady electrical current for 10 hours a day. Within 3 days, the results are striking. The electrified seeds have broken through the soil. The control seeds haven't even cracked their shells. But buried in his notes, almost as an afterthought, is something else entirely. Small flies move freely around the uncharged pot. The electrified one, he writes, sits in what he calls a zone of isolation. Insects approach the edge and turn back, as if encountering a wall that isn't there. He doesn't theorize about why, he just records what he sees, and then the scientific establishment files it away and moves on for the next 94 years. Edinburgh, 1841. Alexander Bain is a clockmaker. He needs cheap, reliable electricity, and he has zero patience for expensive solutions. His idea is almost absurdly simple. 1 copper plate and 1 zinc plate, buried in the wet soil behind his workshop, connected by a wire above ground. He checks his voltmeter, 1 volt. Steady, no acid, no generator, no chemical bath, just moisture in the soil acting as a natural electrolyte. Zinc gives up electrons. Copper collects them. Current flows continuously. He calls it the Earth battery. It powers his clocks for months without a single intervention. And almost as a footnote in his notes, the biting flies around his workshop had completely disappeared. A Scottish landowner named Robert Foster reads about this and runs a copper and zinc network across his barley fields near Elgin. He publishes the results in the British Cultivator in March of 1845. Pest damage near zero. No aphids, no beetles. Workers report that clouds of biting insects, which normally descended on them at dusk, halted at the edge of the treated fields and turned back. The Royal Society calls the findings remarkable. And then, nothing. Documented, consistent, witnessed by multiple observers across multiple years, and completely ignored. Then the 1920s, and this is the part that should have changed everything. A French engineer named Justin Christoflot builds something that must have looked completely insane to his neighbors. A 25-foot post topped with spiraling copper and zinc wire. Below-ground wires fanning outward into damp soil. The entire structure aligned north to south along the Earth's magnetic field. His oat crops grew over 7 feet tall, without a single gram of artificial fertilizer. Grapevines that had been destroyed by the phylloxera plague recovered completely and produced heavy harvests. Insect pests were eliminated. No chemicals, no sprays, nothing but copper, zinc, and wet earth. He sold 150,000 units across Europe. Entire farms running pest-free on nothing but metal and moisture. So why have you never heard this name? Why is there no Christoflot aisle at Home Depot? Here's where it gets dark. In 1912, an international scientific conference reviewed the accumulated evidence for electroculture. The consensus was unambiguous. It works. The science is real. Large-scale adoption was being seriously discussed. And then 1914 happened. The war tore through European agriculture and physically destroyed the electroculture infrastructure that had been built across the continent over decades. When the fighting finally stopped, the munitions factories were left with something the history books don't spend much time on. Massive industrial overcapacity, enormous chemical stockpiles, and suddenly no market. Ammonium nitrate, the base of high explosives, became nitrogen fertilizer. Organophosphate nerve agents were reformulated as insecticides. The chemical industry didn't just enter agriculture, it consumed it, it rewrote it. The Earth battery wasn't disproven. It was made economically irrelevant. One observer at the time put it in terms that have stayed with me. They said, they didn't abandon it because it didn't work. They buried it because it worked too well, cost too little, and lasted too long. It didn't just repel insects, it repelled profit. Now, here's the part that makes all of this impossible to dismiss. In 2015, Dr. Norbert Becker at the German Mosquito Control Association in Heidelberg published a study in the journal Parasites and Vectors. His team seeded containers with mosquito larvae, the same standing water where dengue and Zika vectors breed in cities across the world, and introduced metallic copper in different forms. Euro coins, copper tubing, a thin copper spray applied inside the containers. The results confirmed 270 years of documented field observation. Copper ions released into water achieve near-complete larval mortality. The mechanism is both physical and chemical. Copper and zinc ions are toxic to soft-bodied larvae and disrupt the biological processes that allow them to develop. And here is the detail that sets this apart from every product on the shelf. Insects cannot develop resistance to metal ions the way they develop resistance to synthetic chemicals. The physics does not negotiate. The metal does not expire. The rain keeps recharging it. A $20 device that runs on rainfall has no place in a $5.5 billion industry, which is exactly why you're hearing about this here, and not from anyone with a marketing budget.